Okay, well, welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. My name is Pete Deely, and I'm here with my professor, Professor Lucas Rubbo. Professor, good
Hello,
to see you.
Pete. How are you doing, brother?
I'm good, although I have anxiety, Professor. I do.
Why? Tell me why.
I don't want to get fired from my podcasting job, and I have 0 new subscribers to Submission Coffee. So I apologize.
I think they need to apologize to us, not us to them. They're missing a lot.
It's true. I like that attitude. You're right about that. My business friends continue to tell me what a rotten job I'm doing. Part of they say my problem is I don't tell people where to find us. So you can look at us at we can look at this particular um, set of videos that we slice up on Instagram. It's a well-run life, and I bought the URL Submission Coffee. And if you go there, it will take you to the page in which you can buy our stuff. So I'm going to get better at this, Professor. So, you know. But
It's like
today,
jiu-jitsu, right? Every day a lesson.
that's right. I don't lose. I just learn. But we are lucky today because we have a guest who is a remarkable woman and is going to, I'm sure, teach us a lot. And I'm excited to kind of get her perspective on things. When we talk about the jiu-jitsu mindset, Professor, I mean,
Mhm.
we talk about this idea of what you learn on the mats affects your life off the mats. And so what I believe what we're saying when we say that is that there are principles that jiu-jitsu teaches us, and those
Yes,
principles apply in the parts of our life when we're not in the middle of a jiu-jitsu tournament or training session.
correct.
However, the jiu-jitsu mindset is not the sole property of jiu-jitsu. Like there
Mhm.
are other places in the world where we can find that these principles exist and that people who learn many of the same ideas, but they learn them in their own sort of discipline. Um,
Yes.
and so today we have Jennifer Vollmann with us, and Jennifer's got a lot of accomplishments in her life. So we could go on and on about ways in which she's affected the nonprofit world, ways in which she affected the business world. But today we're going to focus on her on as an athlete. And
Mhm.
as an athlete, there's a lot we could say there too. So the introduction could go on and on. But she, she's competed in 2 Ironmans and she's won an extreme triathlon and will be competing on the world stage in an extreme triathlon later this year. And when she's not being an athlete herself, she's coaching people, and she's a mindset coach and a triathlete coach. Um, and much the way we talk about jujitsu as a tool to be better at your life, you know, uh, Jennifer is a coach for your mind and your body. And so when she's teaching you to be an endurance athlete, she's also, frankly, teaching you to be a better person. So, Jennifer, welcome. We're so glad you're with us.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I mean, I think it might not be obvious to people who are neither jujitsu athletes nor endurance athletes why these things would have a lot in common, but I'm of the opinion that they do. And an expression that if you've listened to our podcast, you've heard us use over and over is this idea that we want people to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I have followed your training life and your athletic life for many years. And you're somebody who is very strong, both in terms of your character and your physical disposition. And I don't think you get to be strong by being, by crumbling in the face of discomfort. So,
Yeah.
Jennifer, I would like for you to kind of kick off our conversation by talking about your relationship to training and getting comfortable in those spaces that are hard and difficult.
Yeah, I think so my background mostly now has been with endurance sports. And so I've done a lot of different races, but beyond just races are like the training around it. So I feel like almost every day I'm in a position of being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that is something that you have to build into. And I think that one of the things that I love about sports and about being an athlete is that you're kind of forced into these positions and you can choose them and you can choose to back down from them. And just because you back down doesn't mean you're failed. It just means that you back down from it. But when you make that active choice to sit in discomfort, then your choice, once you made that choice, is either you can like be in it and relax into it, or you can resist it. And I think we all know that when you resist it, then you suffer even more with anything.
Right.
So what you learn over time is when first you have to learn to choose the discomfort. And then when you choose it, you learn how to either it's physically like relax your body. It's also relaxing your mind. It's allowing breath and it's allowing flow to sit in that and be in that discomfort. And for me as an endurance athlete, I can be in discomfort for hours and hours. And I've trained myself, to do that. And what you learn is that nothing's gone wrong. So yes, your body's giving you signal that like, this is off or this hurts or this, but you're kind of forced to be like, to really understand where is that coming from? And are you actually safe? Are you actually okay? Are you going to die or not? And if you're like, actually, I'm not, all those things are still okay. I can still sit here in this. And then you kind of expand that more. And then that, relates to so many other parts of your life. Because if you're willing to be like, I'm willing to be uncomfortable for 10.5 hours when I do my Ironman race, that's a very long time where I can sit in discomfort. Can I send discomfort in this meeting, or can I say this thing I don't want to say, or can I have this emotion and not react to it? Like it really reflects all these other parts of life.
Jennifer, can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
I think I agree 100% on what you're saying about the training and get comfortable, right? That's our quote here on our podcast. And a lot of relations that we do with jiu-jitsu on that, the way that I like to think sometimes the most simplistic way as possible, like, okay, that's what you need to do. You're going to be uncomfortable, understand that, right? Live through, and that's it. But having like endurance especially about the timing that you're going to be. So if you ever, guys, if you're listening to us and ever try ride a bicycle for that long, or swimming or running, it is extremely uncomfortable, right? This mindset was always yours, or it came with time? Like, how can describe that to us, please?
I mean, I think some of it's always been natural. I think now knowing what I know of myself, I'm a naturally born endurance athlete, just like physically and also mentally. I think some of this has to do with patient. Like I'm a really patient person and I'm willing to let things unfold instead of pushing it. So if you're not willing to, and part of it has to do with discomfort, right? So like if you're uncomfortable, you want to end things as soon as possible, or you think of the finish line, or you'll try to push through something, but then it's going to bite you in the, the ass later, so it's that kind of thing. So I think I've always had the patience. I think the extension of it has come with training and being an athlete. If I can be patient, but like I have to really like monitor myself and really stay within myself and really let things unfold while being uncomfortable. That has come with training and especially with endurance. Yeah, because if you think of the finish line when you step into the water, ooh, that's a long day. When I did the extreme triathlon, I didn't know how long it was going to take because the course was so hard, and it being like 17 hours. And if I had expectations of how long I thought it would take me, like 11 hours, that I don't think I ever would have made the last 6, so it's always just, I'm going to be uncomfortable and I'm okay that I don't know when it ends. And then
it's crazy. I did recently, was my first half marathon. I did a half marathon in Sedona, early February, and no way that I could run like another half after that and swim before and like riding my bike. Not on that day.
Well, but you didn't train for it. You got to train for it. You can't just show up and do it.
True, but it was a really good experience. It was really fun.
So Jennifer, in like there's some of the big differences in terms of what you just described in like a jiu-jitsu athlete's journey for those things, is that like if I train with the professor, the length of time in which I'm going to get to, we would use the term roll, right? The length of time in which I'm going to roll with the professor is entirely up to the professor. Like at any point in time, he's going to submit me and I'm going to tap out. And the length of time that we're talking about here is measured in minutes, So when you talk about like being uncomfortable for 17 hours in a competitive environment, I mean, that's an extraordinary length of time to be focused, to not give up, because your opponent is the clock and your own kind of thoughts, I would think. Could you talk a little bit about how that translates into a daily training, because when I go and train, for jiu-jitsu, the experiences are in bursts, and there's another person. So if I don't show up to my training, someone says, "Hey, where were you?" If I show up for my training and I tap immediately, there's immediate feedback from another human being coming back to me. But when I look at your training, it seems like you have to have such an iron will of focusing things internally, because you in the road, you're on these bicycles, you're running. At any point in time, if you just stop and don't go hard, there's nobody there going, well, you have to.
Yeah, you definitely have to have that voice in your head constantly helping you to get through it. So I would imagine, like, I've not done jiu-jitsu, but I imagine what you really are is hyper focused on like the present moment when you're in that role, right? When you're in it. And that ebbs and flows a little bit more in triathlon because, you've had so many hours. In a race, it doesn't, but it's still that same, like, you're still trying to get back to the present moment. What do I do in this moment? What do I happens in this moment? And that's really what you're training yourself to do, just for, really long periods of time, because it's so easy for your mind to wander. Even in races, you're just like, because it is a very long time to be out there.
Yeah.
And so it's always going back to like, what can I do right now here? What can I do right now here? Am I doing the best I can right now here? And that happens in training. Like, you can't expect to show up to a race and be able to do that with your mind. Like, you just can't, right? So in training, the same way you train your body, you train your mind. And it's like, you have different grooves in your brain. So you can have one groove that wants to quit or have a monkey mind or think of other things or not stay on the task. And that's probably pretty well worn because we use it a lot. But you also have to use the groove that's stay focused, stay on the task, stay on what's at hand, sit in the discomfort. And so in training, like tomorrow, I have a 6-hour bike ride, probably 10 miles I'll ride tomorrow. And that same thing, especially when I'm in my like set intervals for a race thing, I'm going to do exactly what I do in the race day. I mean, back to the present moment. How am I fueling? How am I eating? In cycling, we use watts as like an indicator for how much power we're outputting. So like, what are my watts? What's my heart rate? What's that telling me? And just staying in the present moment as much as I can to develop that groove. So on race day, I know how to go back to it and kind of sit within that. And then, the brilliant part of all of this is that once you have that groove within training, you can then access that groove in other parts of life, as well. And so that's the big piece. Is every day I'm training my mind for the race. Every day I'm thinking of it. Every day I'm on. And some days I don't run as hard as I should. Some days I'm just like, what, I don't have it. And then I deal with the consequences of that. There's always consequences to it.
Sure.
It's not like you can stop training, not have consequences. Just because nobody sees you do it, I know what the consequences are, and I'll feel them on race day too.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, my dad did the Tour de France.
What?
So
That's amazing. He knows how to suffer. Oh,
right,
man.
He was so just to explain here, he's not a cyclist as his profession. He does that because he loves. So the Tour de France, they have one.
Wait, he did the Tour de France because he loved it?
Yeah, but come, wait, I'm gonna get there. He didn't do the whole 2 weeks. It was like one day that they allow amateurs to do the circuit, right? So, but even though like it was years for him to be able to get there because it's a draw, it's not that easy to do it. And he was training a lot like he should for that because he literally loves that. So I did a little bit of the training with him. And I'm also in Brazil, I'm a nutritionist. So I prepare all his meal plans and supplements for the race and everything. But a lot that I talk with him during the training specific for that, you also in a sport that gonna take so long, right, for your end line. It's not 100% of the time that you're gonna be uncomfortable, right? So you know yourself so well that you know specific after that many hours, right? You need to be with that specific mindset to be able to go through that moment, and then you keep going. So that ups and downs that your mind have, it's something to be able to control that is really impressive, right, for those type of sports.
Yeah, it's kind of like a wave. Like we always say, whatever
Yes.
you feel, it won't last more than 5 minutes. So you get
That's interesting.
really high. Like you're like, I get super high as a high. Like this is the most amazing moment. My whole life is happening right now. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, everything hurts. I hate this. This is the most stupid sport I've ever done before. And so it's being aware enough to know that like I'm gonna really feel how great this feels, but I'm not gonna be attached to it because I know that it's not gonna last. And when it gets in the lows, this feels terrible, but it's also not gonna last. And so it's riding those waves and keeping everything kind of steady, and then letting go of the attachment of it. I think that's the biggest piece of
Yeah.
even in everything in racing. It's a long day. Lots of things go wrong. You have to be unattached to the weather, to your competitors, to the race, like everything you have to be unattached from. Because if you're attached to it, then it can ruin your entire, you're so thrown off, you're not able to do it. Yeah. So it's definitely that those waves are intense, right? But you know, they're going to come. And really everything I do is to get me to mile 18 of the marathon. And then from there, it's a crapshoot. Like
Really?
no matter how ready I am for that, I have no idea what that's going to look like. It's just, yeah.
So, I mean, I know 3 times a year you have a part of your coaching business is you'll go down to Costa Rica and you have something called the Pura Vida Challenge. And when I look at I haven't been on this challenge, but I've seen, the Instagram posts. And I'm not a cyclist, but I have done like Tour de Tucson, Tour de Phoenix, Tour de Scottsdale. So
I feel like
done,
you're a cyclist.
yeah. So I mean,
definition.
I've raced my races as long as 115 miles long. And I was never threatening to win any of that. It's much like myself as a jiu-jitsu athlete. I'm not, I just did them, right? I wasn't any great. But when I watch these Pura Vida training sessions, what I see is sort of like extraordinary pain. Like it seems like there's incredible grade. They seem long. These training sessions seem long and intense, where like once you step on that mountain where you take these people up, it looks like it's from this moment you start till the end of it. It looks brutal. I mean, can you talk a little bit about training in Pura Vida Challenge? Because I want to ask you about like when things are so intense, you have no choice other than to be in the present moment. That's what I perceive in your Pura Vida Challenge training is that. However, when I listen to you like running, the amplitude seems flatter, right? Like it has its own danger. Like I might quit quickly in the Pura Vida Challenge because it's just so in my face hard. But on mile 18.5 I also probably have boredom. I mean, or fatigue of like, is this thing ever going to end type of feeling. So can you talk about like the intensity of Pura Vida and then just sort of the fatigue of something that takes you so many hours to complete?
Yeah, Pura Vida is amazing. So, if you've ever been to Costa Rica, they have very mountainous terrain. The directions are up or down. Like that's how they give directions. And you don't like there's maybe like 200 yards of like a flat road, I think, whenever we ride. It's very intense. And the climbs are very steep, very European-esque style steep. And Pura Vida is such an interesting experience because I there's a couple of climbs where I laugh every time I see them because it looks like a straight up, we're like, oh, that's hilarious. Let's go ride bikes up that. This is so stupid. But what I love about it is for my ability. Yeah, it's some of the most intensely present moments I've ever had because if I'm not in the present moment, I will just fall over on my bike. Like I won't have the pure strength. And every time I do it, there's always a question, am I actually strong enough to keep the cranks moving over or will I have to stop?
Yeah.
And that's an intense feeling. And so like you're at the well and then you're like, well, the well's not going to cut it. So maybe I've got another level I can snap into, right? I can like dig into this other level and then you find it and now your well is like that much deeper. Yeah. And so that's kind of the experience of Pura Vida is like, it looks impossible. It seems insane. And then you see other people start to climb, like the local people call it Ticos. So the other Ticos are with us, other Americans we bring down. You're like, well, let me give it a shot. And then you dig and then you dig. And before you know it, you're the top of the mountain surrounded by like amazing people cheering you on. And so it's this really amazing experience of like pure present moment. And then the
And what
community.
percentage grade is that, Jennifer? I mean, I look at it and I'm like, geez, I have no idea what percentage
Yeah,
grade
so
that means.
we ride a lot of 15 plus, a lot of 20% plus, and the steepest we get, we have one pitch. It's very short, but it's we can get up to 30%.
Oh my goodness.
Day 4 is there's this climb called Sacramento, and when I did it, I was the first time any of the local riders had seen a woman even attempt it, and I was the first
Oh
woman
my.
that got to the top. And now we women do it all the time. Even local women will come and do it, which is pretty cool. So it just shows you it shows you the mindset though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I love about Pura Vida is that you have to be a cyclist, but as long as you have gears and you have a mindset of not giving up, you can also make it up the climbs. Like we bring other women who are not competitive cyclists, who are not they don't have a ton of experience on the bike, but they have enough gears, and they're both yogis, and they're just like, I'm just not going to give up. They make it up too.
Wow.
So it's this great example of a lot of people will give up because it looks too hard. But if your mindset is, I'm just not going to give up, then you make it to the top as well.
That's extraordinary. And
Yeah.
so you were the Roger Bannister, right? You broke the 5-minute mile of,
Exactly.
of that. That's amazing. So in that, and by the way, for me, going down those grades is as terrifying, maybe more terrifying than going
It's
up
pretty
those
fun.
grades. And I never got comfortable at those super fast speeds there. And I would say, I'm trying to think of the steepest grade I've ever gone up, but I started to cry at 6%. So I know what 6% feels like. I can pull that up in my head, and I know 10, 12, 15 was just, I mean, the idea of a 30% grade, that I don't even really know what that would even look like. I mean, that's extraordinary that you did that.
Pretty steep.
So which is harder for you, the idea of having to focus on something that feels impossibly difficult in the moment because it's so acute, or the miles 18 to the end of the race, 18 to 26.2, where we're really talking about a different type of toughness. That's a toughness of just not stopping, because the threats are different, I would think.
Really cold water as your first.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
attempt, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the end of the Ironman is more difficult than say those rides in Costa Rica. And partly because you've not only have you've mentally been, it's mentally exhausting just to get to that mile, 18. And then if you've done it, if you were going fast enough, everything hurts. Everything hurts, right? So I could do an Ironman tomorrow and do it slow, and I wouldn't hurt at all, but that's not how I want to race fast. And so because of that, I'm pushing my limits this whole time. And usually by then, your nutrition probably doesn't work. Other things are going to start happening, when you're that maxed out. And that's so hard because it's so easy at the moment to be I'll just run a little slower. Just I'll back off just a little bit, right? And I'll still have a good race, but that option's always there. In Costa Rica, they're either I fall off the bike or I get up the mountain.
Yeah, right.
Here, I to mentally stay on top and hold the pace, even though it hurts so much, and you still have a good amount of time left in the race, and being I am just going to be in this amount of pain, and I will not back off of this pace, and I will try the nutrition. I mean, it's so hard to stay on it, and sometimes I haven't been able to stay on it, and I've backed off a little bit. I've had a good race, but I knew that I backed off. Other races, I've been on it till the very end, and that's the most difficult, exhausting part of it.
And Jennifer, between the three, on swimming, biking, and running, which one usually is the most challenge for you? And if it was different orders, in case the run is the most challenge, do you think would be different as well, or no?
I mean, the in sport's always the most challenging, right? So the run's the hardest because it's last, and everything you do is building you up to have a successful run. If I ride too hard on the bike, I won't be able to run the way I want to run. So the bike usually tends to be more of you're trying not to get bored, and you're trying to make tactical things and eat and nutrient, because it's really going to get hard on the marathon. And so if it was switched, it would probably be the same. It would be that last, 40 miles on the bike. That would be really hard, just because that's what you're building towards. That's when races are won or lost, is in those last. So you do all of this work for the last hour and a half of the race, right? That's when it really matters. And that's where most people will, especially in endurance, will either the bodies will break down, they'll mentally break down, the nutrition will break down. So it's not necessarily about being the fastest on the course. It's about breaking down the least on the course. And I love that. Like, I love when I see people breaking down and like slowing down, and I'm not slowing down. So that's the part that's really great too. It's more of like an outlast your competitors than it is like be faster than them.
So when you mean sorry, Pete, I'm like,
no, yeah, get in there. Yeah.
I thought that I was going to like this. When you mean tactical is more about your nutrition for the second half of the test, or
about the nutrition?
Yeah, when you mean like being more tactical for the cycling, right? Is the part that you're going to be maybe doing some other plans or thinking how we're going to finish. That involves also your nutrition, hydrate again, and have the last fuel for the rest of the test.
Yeah, we say that nutrition is the fourth discipline of triathlon, because you have to really have enough, because you can't eat as many calories you burn in the marathon, you don't have time to replace them, nor are you able to carry them in your stomach. So you're cycling, like I have trained my stomach to hold 400 calories an hour, which is a lot of calories for my size, and be like bent over in like a aero position on the bike. So like you have to, and it's so easy when you're like having to go down the bike to like forget to fuel or to do this. So like it really, and also when you fuel, right? So like if you have a fast section on the course, you shouldn't be fueling, you should be riding fast. So knowing the course, knowing when the appropriate time is to fuel, to not lose time, but also like do it enough way so that when you get on the run, you have enough calories in your system, your gut can handle it, and you can run fast up until mile. And really, and then in the marathon, it's anybody's guess what goes in your stomach at that point. I usually use Coke and Gatorade is my go-to usually on the run course.
Wow. Well, from a competitive perspective, so in Jiu Jitsu, our opponent is manifested as a human being in front of us, right? So, I mean, and that human being, we are in physical contact with a fight, right? So the fight is not theoretical, it's a fight, and it's got a short duration. And to put pressure on our opponent is not like an idea, it's literal pressure, it's all of that. So when you were thinking of yourself as a competitor in a race such as this, and I have never done I've done triathlons, but I've never done anything nearly as long as what you talk about. So I imagine not every moment of every race, who you're competing with is immediately in your line of sight or all the rest of it. So when you want to put pressure on a competitor, how are you thinking about that? Because it seems like in a 11-hour stretch or 17-hour stretch, however it is, it might come down to like something as specific as fueling properly while you're, when do you fuel properly? And if your competitor doesn't follow a similar regimen that you do in that particular part of the race, you then have an advantage. But are you thinking in your competitive times how to increase the pressure on the people around you? Or are you totally just inwardly focused in that? Like, I'm curious about the differences between your competitive experience and the Jiu Jitsu competitive experience.
Yeah, so I'm not really actively trying to put pressure on opponents, except maybe like at the end if I know for sure it's going to be like a foot race. And I've done that before in races, or somebody's chasing me. But where it mostly gets you is you have to stay inside yourself. So if you decide to put pressure on somebody else and you can't stick with it, then you're kind of screwed. So like I could go, like women will pass me, and I have to make the decision all the time. Should I stay here or should I go with them? Should I try to pass them? Can I keep them? And so it's always this like, kind of staying within, because it's very easy to get competitive and go too far outside yourself. And then 2 hours later, you're going to pay the price for it.
Yeah.
So it's always this interesting, like, where are they at? Where am I at? What is my limit? Can I stay within my limit? Do I have a little bit more? Does it matter? It's a lot of like tactical things that happen. Though when I pass people on the run, I do like quiet my breathing as much as I can. And I try to be like super friendly, like, hey, great job. In hopes they think that like, well, she feels great. So I'm not even going to try to go with her. So I definitely do that. This is the best day ever. It's so fun. Whatever I can. So the competition, Matt, and the other thing with triathlon is you don't really know where they are because you all start the swim at different times. So it's a very strange thing of like, you have a sense of people chasing you and you're chasing them, but you don't always necessarily see them, but you're also with 2,000 other athletes. So I'll use like other people to pick off on my run for like my motivation. Like I'm going to get to that guy. I'm going to get to that woman. I'm going to pick her off. That person's slowing down. So like you're both competing against everybody. And then you also don't know who's behind you or who's coming. So it's this kind of interesting thing of, if you let that get to you, it also can be like, oh my gosh, like everybody's coming for me. I'm losing everything or this. And that's not true either. So it really takes your time to kind of come back down to like what you're able to do and, you know, be super friendly to people you pass. They think that you're faster than you are.
And you have been competing in triathlon for how long, Jennifer?
6 years. So I'm doing, my next race is Ironman Texas, and it will be my 8th Ironman distance that I've done, plus a lot of other halves and sprints and all that.
And
stuff.
before that was competing Olympic lifting and CrossFit.
I mean,
right?
Loosely competing. I did do some. I am definitely not made for CrossFit or Olympic lifting. But I did some meets and stuff, and I did like the scale CrossFit competitions. But prior to that, I was never an athlete. So my whole life, I was non-athlete until I was like 30. Maybe like 29.
That's crazy because
it was crazy.
To
and I
be
went
on
to
that
CrossFit.
level now, right?
I went to a CrossFit gym and they called me an athlete. I was like, oh my God, am I finally an athlete? I was so excited. like that one word, because when I was growing up, I always thought I was one, even though I was like picked last in gym. I had a PE teacher said I was too feminine to do anything with sports, so like I shouldn't try. Right. Like just like every indicator, I can't throw anything, I can't catch anything, I'm not fast. Like every indication was that like you're terrible at sports. But I'm like, I swear I'm an athlete. Like, I feel like an athlete. Like somewhere in me is an athlete. And so when I went to CrossFit, somebody called me that, and I was like, oh, like maybe part of me can be like an okay CrossFit athlete or whatever. And then when I found triathlon, I was like, oh, actually, I'm a very talented endurance athlete. I just didn't know. And so, and it's true. I'm very good. I'm very competitive, especially for the short. I mean, I couldn't even ride a bike 6 years ago. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say, because if you were not an athlete for that long, but you definitely are really competitive to be able to be on that level right now. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. So I'm just like naturally built for endurance sports. And I have been, you know, I've always had the ability to go. When I used to travel a lot for work, I could just show up in a city and run 8 miles without even training, no issue. So I have that like natural gift. I just didn't know it was like a thing until I found triathlon.
And I mean, as the connection between your physical life, your athletic life, and the rest of your life, I mean, I'm curious about 2 ideas. One is, if you had not found this fit between your natural skills and, you know, if you did not realize that you are in fact a great world-class endurance athlete, you know, how did that change you? I know it was important, but how did it change you? Because in some level, this confirmed a deeply held opinion you had of yourself that the world didn't affirm, right? Like, you're like, wait a second, I'm an athlete. And the world's like, no, you're too feminine to be an athlete. And yet you were right. And the messages that were given to you were wrong. So was it a transformation, or was it more gradual? I mean, I'm curious of the effect of coming into your athleticness as a full-grown adult. I mean, you were in your late 20s when you started this, and you're, you know, and I don't even know how old you are right now, Chad.
I know. I'm 39.
You're 30. So I mean, that's a 10-year arc of like the beginning of your athletic journey to having won, you know, significant championships among very, very competitive players in the world of the sport that you didn't even know you were good at 12 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is I found triathlons, and I got mostly into CrossFit after giving birth to my daughter and leaving my career. So I left my career to be at home with my daughter, which was not something I ever thought I would do. And I lost a huge part of my identity when I did that, and gratefully got to spend time with my daughter. But like, I really lost who I was in a really, really big way. And so then finding triathlon, like specifically, like CrossFit was helpful, you know, like I could sink in. But when I was like, oh, like I have meant to do this. My body is made for this. My mindset's made for this. I was meant to do endurance sports. It filled this huge gap of, I don't know who I am anymore and my place in the world. So it was this interesting, like, it was connection between all these different pieces and trying to find, and even, you know, I used to run a company. So like my like data driven mind and goals and accomplishments and that, like I didn't have anywhere to put that. And so now I could put it in triathlon in addition to discovering this big piece of it. And I don't know where I'd be now if I haven't discovered it, honestly. Like I was really lost. I don't know where that being lost would have led me. And so it just wonderfully led me down the path of triathlon. And this, you know, it's so interesting. A huge part of my life now is being an athlete, and it didn't exist in this significant of a way 6 years ago. And that's kind of shocking. And now I have a career around it, and this is what I do. This is what I do. Eat, breathe, and sleep being an athlete and triathlon, endurance sport, and mindset work. And so it's just who I am, but it feels innately who I should be at the same time.
So is that, go ahead, Professor.
No, go ahead, Pete.
Well, I mean, that's it. Yeah. Well, you and me both, like, we love talking to you, Jennifer. So, you know, this podcast will make sure we respect your time. Otherwise you're going to be here for hours and hours. And so like, I'm trying to paraphrase back, and I'm curious if maybe you can give a story of maybe somebody you've worked with too. I mean, is this a process of you becoming more who you were meant to be, or did you create somebody that you wanted to be? You know, like, is this an uncovering of yourself and that, hey, I was this person and I've just kind of stripped away the things that were hiding it? Or is it that you found something and you built piece by piece something new? Because I think when you're as a mindset coach and a life coach, you probably deal with people in a certain amount of pain. And often that pain is kind of a reflection of, they feel constrained, like they're unhappy because of whatever. And either those are external circumstances or internal circumstances. So you've done something that many people haven't done in their life, and that's you've found a road that is aligned with who you are inside. So I'm curious, is that a process of discovery, or is it a process of creation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, and it's a little bit of both. And so I think in order to create, you're still driving it from within. I don't think you can just like create from out of the blue. So even in the power of creating, and when I work with clients, when they're creating something different they want from their life, it still comes from connecting back in who they are.
Okay.
And so when I became an athlete and I connected like really powerfully in that space of me, I then could create this other place where I want to be, you know, and over time it evolved into being, you know, going to Ironman World Championships. That's not where it started at all, but that's where it evolved too. And now I have all these other really big goals and dreams that I want to create. But every time I go to the creation, it's still tapping back into like the core of who I am. And that's where the powerful creation comes. That's when you can create amazing things in your life. If you're able to both look at what you're causing, right, which can be hard to look at, like you also cause your results, the good and the bad ones. So an awareness of what your life looks like. And that's where the constraint comes in, or how you're interacting with that, connecting back in with who you are, and then deciding, what are you going to do now? And that's where the creation happens.
I'm looking at, I have a 3x5 card that has my handwriting. And on that 3x5 card that is in front of me every day says, every system is perfectly designed to produce the results it gets. And so in Jiu Jitsu, one of the opponents is the scale, right? And so I compete in terms of like right on the cusp of my natural sort of drinking beer weight. Like I'm not a bad eater, but I'm not a pristine eater. So, you know, if I'm not dialed in terrifically, I'm like 2 pounds heavier, 3 pounds heavier than I would be if I kind of tighten it up. And I think to myself, my system is that I am lazy about my diet. Like my palate speaks to generally good food. So I'm not like eating, the world would look at me and go, well, you know, he's eating good enough. But as an athlete, I don't dial it in, because at the end of the day, I really like playing chess on the computer and drinking beer. Like that to me is an amazing conclusion. And so when I have a tournament and I step on the scale 10 days before it, I think I have designed a system that makes me anxious every 10 days before a tournament, because now I got to lose these, you know, couple of pounds, and it's unnecessary. You know, it's like I could design a different system. So to paraphrase back, what I think I hear is sort of the ability to know who you are truly gives you a more potent ability to create what you ultimately want, like in your executive function of your brain. I mean, is that a fair paraphrase of what you just kind of said? I mean,
Yeah. And, and the way my mindset works is everything that happens to you is a circumstance and it's neutral. And then you have a thought
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
And it's that thought that creates your feelings and your actions and your results.
right.
And so we can do a lot by changing our thoughts. But if you don't believe the thought you change to, then it's just noise.
Yeah.
So that's where like the self-belief, like I can't go from I'm going to do my first triathlon to I know I can be an Ironman world champion because I can say it all I want to, but like that's not going to get me anywhere because I don't believe it.
Right.
And so that's why you have to go back and like, what is it do I believe that maybe is a little more neutral, or maybe will get me to where I want to go better, or maybe serves me more. And so, but then like that grows over time. So that will like slowly evolve and change. So as you create something new in your life, you then can create new thoughts and new things you believe, which can create different parts. But I think that that's the piece. So the same thing with the system. Like if you think, like I'm so nervous to be on the scale and I'm anxious to be on the scale, because me, that's like then you're going to be anxious because you're having that thought. If your thought is, I can, whatever, either weight class is fine, doesn't make a difference to me, you're going to have a totally different, feeling going into that experience too.
Yeah. Well, no, my anxiety is having to come to my professor and tell him I'm too fat to fight today. Like, because you sign up for a weight class, you commit to fighting at
Got
that
it.
weight class. And so it's a promise you give, to yourself that you would behave in a certain way. And when I listen to you talk about your approach to yourself, it seems like you're trying to extend your experience to people that you work with, that you found a true core of who you were that you suspected was there, but then you kind of uncovered in some manner. And then as you connected with that, you became a very potent and vital force in the world for yourself. But it seems like for others as well. Do you have any kind of stories of maybe someone who's the arc of their experience looks similar to yours? I mean, do you have something you could share with us that way?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, because I coach a lot of new triathletes, a lot of people do one and they're done. And then the other group goes all in immediately. That's kind of like how triathlon differentiates. And so I have a lot of athletes that have done one and then have gone all in. And what brings them and what has brought me back to the sport, and I think what brings them and watching them, is that they're able to push themselves in ways physically that they can't otherwise, but also mentally too. And if you're able to make that like mind body connection and use training to supplement your life in that way, that's very different than going to, I would say, like a Pilates class. Like you can get fit, there's a lot of ways to get fit that does not require you racing like many, many, many hours, right? Like in fact, I would argue that like right now I'm fit, but I'm not very healthy based off of the amount of training I'm doing for a race, right? There's a different thing. But what got me and what I can see get a lot of my athletes is when they connect to, wow. And I'll get this. I just got this from this great athlete. I did a program for him. He was resistant to the fact that he could run that fast. And I said, why don't you just trust me and just try? And he was like, fine, I'll trust you. And I was like, well, maybe like think about it in a different way. So he like was able to reset how he saw something, and he blew his mind with how fast he could run.
Right.
I knew he could run that fast, but it took him changing his mindset, a little bit of trust, and like refocusing. And then he saw what he was able to do. And so now he's learned that through triathlon that then applies, in all these other places. And so I have a lot of experience of athletes that like get that piece, and that's why they keep it's almost an addictive piece. If you're like, if you like that experience of like blowing your mind, like triathlon's a great place to come do it. And so I think that's where I love it too.
And sometimes it's all they need, right? Like you as a coach and a professional in your area, you can see values and some qualities and skills in people that they don't see or they don't believe on themselves until someone actually tell them, improve for whatever reason, that they can do that. And once it's done, they believe more in themselves, but also they believe in you as well, right? So the growth is exponential. And that's what I love about sports, because on my opinion, that's what I do, right? And I do because I love, is one of the best tools for we understand and know better about ourselves, right? We always think that we will react in a certain way if that happened, right? Which we talk a little bit before we start everything here. But we truly only know yourself on the pressure moments, right? Moments of
Mhm.
stress that you're not planning that action, and the action happens. And some people, they don't like what they see on themselves right away, right? And that can be a quitting attitude on jiu-jitsu, on triathlon, whatever it is. Some people, they want to train that and make it better. They want to strive and struggle through this. And some people, they just have that naturally, right? And when you start to apply, in my opinion, when you start to be able to apply all those, be comfortable, getting uncomfortable, and go through and believe and understand that's the mission, and you're gonna pass no matter what. It's what makes you different than everyone else, right?
Yeah. And I think it's that, like, I think what athletes have to be, this part of being comfortable is the unknown. You don't know how it's going to end. You don't know who you're going to be in those pressure moments. And you have to detach from who you think you are. Because if you stay solid with, I'm this person, I'm going to be this way, and it doesn't go that way, you'll be disappointed. You won't be open to it, and new things can't happen to you. And so, like, it's like, I know this about me, but I'm detaching from anything. I'm just going to be in this moment and allow whatever happens, because then you can unlock so much more of yourself. But that's also scary. So it's that, like, mix too of just being, I love, like, the moment right before the gun goes off and you start the race, because you're about to have one of the most difficult days of your life. Like, it's just about ready to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. You just got to go do it. And that is, like, that's crazy to be like, here I go into this. Like, I don't know what, and that's, like, and it's also really powerful if you let it be. So it's that, it's kind of that discomfort, but that unknown, and then opening up of who you think you are, and being open that maybe you're something different.
Yeah,
Good and bad.
I love what you're saying, Jennifer. I mean, I certainly experienced this with Professor Lucas as coaching me, because I mean, I come to jiu-jitsu, many people say 50 is absolutely the most perfect time to start jiu-jitsu, right? So I come to jiu-jitsu well past a rational person's decision to do that. So I'm closing in on my, about 2.5 years in my training. And I mean, my experience with him as a coach is that sometimes he has to hold for me the idea that I can learn something, even if it feels to me like there's no way I can learn that, because I'm like, I'm not flexible enough to do that, professor, is something I might say to him. And then he'll show me, you're doing it wrong. You're actually, if you do it right, you have all the flexibility you need to do this. But to me, it seems like, no, don't you understand? My shoulders are jacked. Everything is broken. This body's been through the ringer. And he's like, no, it's just that you're doing it wrong. And so my ability to relax into his opinion of what I'm capable of, rather than insist that my opinion is the truth of what I'm capable of. And so when I listen to you, I mean, it seems like you're holding space for this person to say, this person tells you, I can't run that fast. And you say, well, why don't you let me believe for this moment that you can run this fast, and trust me to do what I'm instructing you to do. And then we'll have this conversation later. Like, just take a breath on who's right. Let me be the one that's right for a moment.
Yeah,
I mean,
and my coach has done this for me forever, right? And so, like, I still have, Marilyn's still my coach, and she still does this. And when I also think about, like, a lot of people I think there's people think they have to believe something 100% before they can, like, do it or act on it, when really you need, like, 1% belief. Like, you just need a little bit to get. It's okay if you don't believe 100%, like, just believe a little bit. And sometimes it's helpful when you're trying to get to the next level is borrow the belief from other people. So, like, I borrowed Marilyn's belief in me, and I asked, essentially by saying, trust me, I asked my athlete to borrow my belief in him. And I did this with my daughter. My daughter had a or a singing recital, and she was super nervous. And I was like, listen, I believe 100% you're going to be amazing. You can borrow my belief until you have your own. Like, whatever you can do to prop that up to get you that level. And then she did great, or he did the run, or I did the workout. And now I've got that belief for myself. So it's so much more of, like, a scale and, like, a ladder of belief. And the people get frozen because they're like, well, I don't think I can do it, so I can't even start. Like, can you think, like, 1% of you think you can do it? Like, can you start there? And that's where coaches are helpful, because coaches will reflect back belief and a different possibility that you just can't see in that moment. And that's what really opens you up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I think of all the things to do with a life, to open up
Right.
space for somebody, to show them that your notion of what you're capable of is smaller than what you're actually capable of, is one of the most beautiful things people can offer each other.
Mhm.
We have a lot of kids, Jennifer, at our school, and the professor's really good at that. The jujitsu is a part of learning to be a better human being, and that this is a vehicle in which we are going to learn to be disciplined, to learn to be polite, to learn to be compassionate. And we often talk about, like, if we have an aggressive child, that jujitsu will actually move them back towards being appropriately assertive and not overly. And conversely, a very timid child might then become more assertive in the world, and so
Mhm.
balances that, and that is created by space that the coach, the instructor, the person who believes in you offers to that. So uh, I'm going to avoid the traps of my own business experience with Submission Coffee, and let's talk a little bit about, like, how to find you, because there may be people listening that go, I really want to work with Jennifer Vollmann. So where are all the various, talk a little bit about your business, so that way people who want to work with you might be able to find you.
Okay, perfect. Well, a good way of finding me is on Instagram, just my name, Jennifer Vollmann, and I do both training stuff and mindset stuff. I do mindset videos and stuff that's on there. And my website is findingendurance.com, and that will have all my different coaching options. I have some articles on there that I write to you about mindset and training. That's also there, but that's how you can find me.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so Vollmann is Vollman. In
Two
case
N's.
excuse me. Oh, thank you. Say that again. Spell it out for us.
It's Vollmann.
And two N's.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I imagine Instagram could probably figure out without the
The algorithm, the algorithm will direct you properly. And
it'll figure it out.
yeah, it'll figure it
And
out. And finding endurance.
findingendurance.com is my website. Yeah.
Okay, I could spell that if I had to. Professor, as we head in here to the conclusion, anything else you want to cover before we return Jennifer
Uh,
to her training?
lot of things. No, today was just a too short episode. I really would like to spend more time talking with you, Jennifer. Really appreciate your time to be here with us, sharing a little bit about your work, about your life, and it was amazing. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Well, it's a privilege. And so for those of you, if this is your first episode of the Jiu Jitsu Mindset, you got a chance to, we got a chance to see how these principles that we talk about earlier in our podcast are not just the provenance of Jiu Jitsu, that the Jiu Jitsu mindset lives in other disciplines. And, Jennifer's here talking about the endurance athlete, having much the same mindset. The competitive landscape is different when you're either swimming, running, and biking than you are on the mat in the jiu-jitsu gym. However, much of the same sort of principles that we learn training in jiu-jitsu apply to other places, and those lessons also apply to us. And so I'll think about you next time I'm thinking about, like, can I keep going? Like, Jennifer could do 17 hours of stuff. I surely can survive 5 minutes on the mats. Our experiences are explosive, right? Like, it's can start and finish in a heartbeat. And so it's a different type of thing. But leading up to it, it's always a long grind. So I'm going to
Yeah.
remember you in my training. So Jennifer, thank you very much. And we hope to, maybe we'll have you back if you have time, and we'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.